Great, thank you. The next thing I wanted to talk at length about was our Canalside and Cobblestone study. We commissioned this study approximately October of last year. This is I'm going to take a look at the Canalside and Cobblestone area. This map here shows a map of the study area, basically starting at the 190, moving down through the new Canalside area, all the way down to Michigan Avenue, and then including the Naval and Servicemen's Park and all of the development that's going on in the Canalside area, as well as out of the Cobblestone area. So we're taking a look at this entire area as part of our study area for the study. I just wanted to go back and talk briefly about, we identified goals early on, and I wanted to talk about what those goals were before I jumped into some of the results. The first goal was to enhance the overall transit access throughout the study area, or throughout the two different Canalside and the Cobblestone districts. The second one was to facilitate reuse and rehabilitation of the DL&W terminal. So we really wanted to have any study results talk about how we could reuse or bring that facility back online as a viable resource for the authority. And then the third goal was to provide capability for extending the rail beyond the current special event station. So those were the three goals we established moving into the study, and now I want to talk about some of the results. So the first thing we did is we did an extensive stakeholder outreach. So we talked to both private sector and public sector. We talked to folks such as the City of Buffalo, Erie Canal Harbor Development Corp. We talked to a number of developers, primarily those developers who have interest within the study area, which would include the Buffalo Sabres, includes the Canalside, and a number of other property owners in the area. So we went out and did this significant outreach and interviewed a whole number of stakeholders. And some of the results that we found here was there was a consensus about extending the light rail to the Cobblestone area. They did feel that that was a positive pursuit. And they also felt that the Metro Rail would help drive development in this area. So we did get positive feedback on anything we did there. They felt it was in concert with helping to drive the development and economic development in that area. And that they did agree with our goal that we should be extending the rail, or the study results should allow us to extend the rail in the future, and that was an appropriate goal for the study and for us as an agency. And the fact that the transit-oriented development opportunities are increasing, and they are increasing more with the rail, so they felt that, once again, tying the rail extension in would create more development opportunities in their areas. Relative to the special event station, there's a lot of mixed feelings on there. There was some folks that felt it had value, but due to the fact that it had limited utility, there was really mixed feelings on how appropriate that was for us in the future, and if it really should be there, or if we should do something else. And we looked at Metro Rail extension along South Park. They felt that that was a viable option as long as South Park remained open for traffic itself. So that was one of the considerations. Other issues that they identified, we felt that the service itself, Metro Rail, should be highly visible and inviting. So it should be something we can promote just with the alignment, with the visibility of the system itself. We talked about the second level of DL&W. Didn't really feel it was necessary to go to the second level with the rail service itself, but once again, tying it back into having access to that we felt was important. And they did feel that most likely there'd have to be some sort of incentive available to make the DL&W second floor viable for redevelopment. Talked about BNMC and how the extension could help with some of the parking issues there, and there was some consensus on that. And then we also talked about multimodal hub and the potential for doing something like that. The funny part about this multimodal discussion here was talked about multimodal with paddleboards, kayaks, bikes, pedestrians. So when we talk about multimodal, often we talk about bus and car. The discussion here was a little bit different. You can kind of see the evolving nature of our community with this. So we did have some operations issues that we wanted to go over because we felt these were important prior to moving into the alternatives. we wanted to assume that maintenance activities can't be relocated. As you're aware, we did the facilities consolidation study, completed that about a year and a half ago, and that really significantly identified the fact that the yard and shop facilities needed to remain in that location, and the federal asset and the investment to doing anything else other than that would be inappropriate. We prefer not to mix revenue and non-revenue service. Some of the alternatives do a mixture of revenue and non-revenue, but the preference was not to do that, and if so, they're looking at ways to manage that. We were looking at potentially as part of track 4 or other storage tracks, 10 and 12, and that'll make more sense to you as I go through some of the alternatives. The service extension at Cobblestone will require another double crossover at the end of service, and this is just a way that we manage our vehicles and can maintain headways. So that's an operational requirement or consideration. And then there was a lot of concerns, once again, about using the second level of the DL&W for train service and how that may complicate or make things very difficult with us operating with the trains and moving them in and out of revenue service. So those were operational findings that kind of drove the restrictive side of the study. So let's jump into...
Hey, Tom, could you just slow down for a second? Explain the revenue, non-revenue service. What are you really talking about, and what is the implication?
Okay, if you ride the rail today, you ride it down to the foot of Main Street in the special event station. Just beyond there is a point where you go out of revenue service. So that's basically where we serve customers. And once you go beyond that point, it gets into non-revenue service, where that's strictly an operational facility. So there's different requirements on standards for operating, on standards for track work, and how you intermingle the different traffic. So when you create a clear delineation between, from this point forward, we're in revenue service and customers can come on and off, and this point forward we're not, and this point back we're not. When you start intermingling that, it becomes complicated with how you run your operation, as well as some of the standards on how you build the facility.
What, remind us what track 4 is?
I'll show you in a second.
Okay.
So let's talk about the alternatives. So we identified 5 separate alternatives, and I'd like to walk through those right now with you. Alternative 1, or consider here alignment 1, is South Park. We can see the alignment here. Once again, here's the First Niagara Center. Our special event stations are right in the location, right at the foot of Main Street before it turns and goes down South Park. This alignment continues down South Park Avenue to Michigan on the street right-of-way itself. So the advantage of this, and I'll get into some of the details of how this works in a second, but the advantages of this alignment is least impact to existing operations. We talked about the impacts to operations. This really has no impact on those operations. It's highly visible, and it allows us to put a nice station on South Park that would be highly visible to anyone in that area. The nice part about this, it allows us to phase anything we do within the train shed or the facility itself. So we could really build this, it would have independent utility, wouldn't be required to modify anything within the facility. So that's a nice from a cost or a development standpoint. And it allows the flexibility for future expansion. So the disadvantages are, the primary disadvantage we found with this is it does share the road bed with the private vehicles, especially with trucks, buses. If you're familiar with the backside of the First Niagara Center, when there's events going on there, that's the main staging area for those events. And then when the events are ongoing, obviously there's a lot of traffic, both pedestrian and vehicles in that area. So relative to this being an ongoing corridor that we may extend in the future, having that shared facility was a major concern to us. There is no direct access to the second level of DL&W with this alternative, and it would require the station platforms to be on the street edge or in the center of the street, and once again, the truck staging. So what does this look like? This is the area we're discussing. Track 4 is the track that's right along the edge of the building here. So you can see this right here. This is looking back toward the First Niagara Center. You can see basically the building comes right to the edge here. And we've got the clear area over here. And you can see it's fairly wide in here, which would allow us to go ahead and put that resource within the right of way. This is a typical section of one of the alternatives and how this may look. This is actually within the road bed. You can see here that we would have the tracks and the cars. This is cars sharing Main Street cross-section essentially. It's the same thing we looked at there. But you can see how we could put this within the existing right-of-way that we showed earlier and how this would essentially work where there was a station. Another alternative that we looked at as well is actually putting a station in the center of the street and serving the rail from either side. So there's two alternatives that go relative to this alignment that could be considered with the station access for South Park, and that would be if the station were located right in this cobblestone area. Once again, what we're focusing on now is the alignments more than the actual station locations. That was alignment number one. Alignment number two we're calling offset South Park. So this is essentially the same alignment, except we're using, and I use this highly technical term called squishing. We squish the rail off to one side and leave the cars alone. So this is the same alignment. We stop basically from the end of revenue service today, which is at the foot of Main Street at the special event station, and follow the South Park alignment down once again to Michigan Avenue in that proximity. But we go along the edge of the roadway instead of down the center of it. The advantage of this is obviously less impact on South Park Avenue. That's consideration. It does encourage reactivation of South Park, assuming the fences can be removed, and we believe they could be. It does continue to allow phasing and the flexibility in the future, so we can still do this in a cost-effective manner without really having to get in and do anything with the facility itself. The disadvantages, we start to intermix the revenue and non-revenue service. But we do feel it's manageable in this alternative. It does track 4. Once again, that track 4 is that alignment right along the edge of the building. There's some mixing of public and secure areas, but once again, we feel we can manage those. And again, there's no direct access to the second level with the LNW, so those are the disadvantages. But we feel that this is probably better than the South Park alignment alternative. So what does this look like? Once again, here's the track 4 area right along the inside edge of the fence. And you can see this is actually from First Niagara looking down the other direction towards Michigan Avenue. So track 4 is in this area, which would require removal of this fence in this area right here. Jason, can you go back one slide? Just go back. When I talk about sharing of mixing of revenue and non-revenue, the area right in here, it's a little triangle area that's right along the alignment, which has access into the shops facility. This would have to all remain non-revenue, so there would have to be gate access in here and control on how we get in there. And the same thing is true in this area. So that's when we talk about mixing and non-mixing. When you do this, you come into the track 4. In order to get access, my little shiny light's dying. In order to get access to the shops itself, you still have to come in revenue service and then break out of the revenue service itself. Whereas today, it's a clear ending. This is the end of revenue service and you go out. So it's really just an operational or management consideration. So this is how this would look. Once again, off to the side, utilizing track 4 and putting it. Shows a center station in the location, and then another track. All of these alternatives consider 2 tracks, and that's one of the goals was once again to have the ability to future extend service. If we go with a 1-track alignment, it really limits our ability to future service beyond this location. And this does, again, shows how traffic would be able to remain on South Park itself without impacting our rail operations. So there is enough, you see the 66 feet, that's the right-of-way. There is enough right-of-way within this area to accommodate this alternative. Go ahead. From 1983, there was a previous study that was done. This alignment, this configuration was looked at as well in that study. This is, the best I can tell, the 4th time we've looked at these issues. The 4th time we've studied it. The first time was 1983, when there was a significant study to look at a naval park and extension of the mall. There was something done in the late 80s, another study and then in the 90s, there was another study looking at incorporating the facility into the First Niagara Center development. So we look back at all the previous studies and obviously see what was done, and this is an alignment similar to our offset South Park that was looked at previously. And this shows an artist's rendering of what a station may look like with this offset alignment. It shows a station right in the area of the First Niagara Center around the back just after the curve. And I'll show some of where those may be located on a future slide. Alignment number 3, this is right through the shops itself. So we actually looked at running alignment. So this really mirrors the previous one where we're offset down along the South Park Avenue, but instead of the smushing that I talked about earlier, we actually go right into the yard and shop facility itself. So the advantages, less impact to South Park and less impact to the streetscape. The major disadvantages, obviously, it impacts our rail operations, and that's would require relocation, and that's a federal asset. I talked about that earlier. Fatal flaw for this alternative. We have the mixing of both public and secure areas of revenue and non-revenue, and once again, there's no direct access. So this one has a significant flaw with it. This is just a photo of some of the areas you'd have to be running your service through, and obviously, kind of self-explanatory. Now let's talk about alignment number 4. This is actually through the DL&W train shed itself. So instead of coming down along South Park at the current termination of revenue service, we now head more over towards the river's edge itself and go into the DL&W train shed along the river's edge. So this is an alignment we started looking here, and then when we come out the backside, we start to look at extension service along our existing right-of-way rather than along the South Park corridor. So this alignment takes consideration of moving right into that facility itself. So the advantages of this are, once again, there's really no impact at all to South Park Avenue whatsoever. It brings the rail access right into the DL&W terminal itself, creates, once again, now you've got more of an internal station itself. You're not actually outside. It allows really for good access to the water side itself or to the waterfront. The disadvantages that consistently we have, we're mixing, once again, secure, non-secure, revenue, non-revenue areas. It requires the upgrade of several switches. That's what we talked about before. Once you start putting revenue service into switches, we have to upgrade those. And one of the negatives as well is now if we move it into that area, that rail line is not as highly visible to the public. They don't really see that. Although we could do something with the station that would be highly visible, you don't really see the train itself as a highly visible attraction. Going back to 83 again, we looked at this in a previous study, and what this is configuring is tracks 10 and 12 within the train shed itself, center platform with escalators and stairs that would go up to the second level of the DL&W. From this location, you can then go and exit out to the Riverwalk itself. You could then go out and exit out to South Park. You could also then go and access through overhead bridges to First Niagara Center or parking structures in that area. The other big advantage of this now, if we're up here in this area and providing pedestrian flow through that area, now we have direct access to the second level of the DL&W, both for train customers, but as well as folks on the street would then have accessibility to the second level of the DL&W. So that was alignment number 4. Alignment number 5 is essentially the same thing, but looking to go up onto the second floor of the DL&W itself with the train. So that's the same exact alignment. You look in here, we've shown some lines on the drawings on both before and after. Those are intended to indicate where we would require structures to get the train up into that level. So that's an added consideration for anything to move it to the second level of the DL&W. So the advantage of this, it's right up on the second level. It allows the station to be incorporated right into that second level of the station. And if you were to extend the rail beyond the DL&W, you have grade separation already created. You can move it on through at an elevated level. The disadvantages are the support facilities alone, just the bridges to get it up to that level, is between $40 and $50 million, an incremental cost for this alternative. It requires immediate improvement to the second level of the DL&W. You can't do that phasing or incremental development of the project, and creates a real difficulty between moving trains between the first and second level when you're doing operations. And there is a proposal on the streets currently that's being looked at to put a bridge to the outer harbor at the base of Main Street. This may not be compatible with that bridge. This alternative could be pursued if we were willing to undertake some of the concerns we had here. So here's a picture of the second level of the DLNW. Will be located up in here. Obviously, it's nice because some of the platforms are already there, but once again, we would have to really invest in this facility in order to accommodate this. And this, once again, was looked at in '83, the same type of thing by putting future track and track up here at that level as well. So it's been previously looked at. This drawing here shows the bottom of a bridge that will be required. And this is looking at, obviously, the first Niagara Center and the new Canalside building, Harbor Center. It shows the board what that bridge bottom would look like and how it would impede not only the visual access through there, but potentially even pedestrian access through that area. So before I go into the recommendations, I just want to touch base on the station locations. One of the considerations with this study, and with any studies we do relative to light rail extension, is the fact that due to the requirements of the Americans with Disability Act, all of our station requirements now would be full high-level boarding. So if you're familiar with our underground stations, they are built for 4-car consist, and you can level up, you can board at any train at a level boarding from a platform. Any stations we build in the future, whether or not they are outside or inside stations, will require that. So what you see in this drawing is the approximate length of a station platform drawn on here to show what the impact would be or where the potential locations are. And obviously, these can't be located in points where there's curves. So we have to identify tangent sections. And in here, we've just identified a few locations where platforms could be located on South Park itself, just for consideration, and so we can see where that would be. And then there's one, the center one is located down here that I showed you in the previous graphic. So this is just for future considerations. As we move forward with the alignments, we'll start to look at station locations and specific to those. So the recommendations that we're presenting to the board today are to move forward with 2 alternatives. The 2 alternatives we're recommending to move forward with is alternative number 2, which is the offset South Park alignment, and alternative number 4, which is through the terminal at the grade level. So those are the 2 alternatives that have been recommended by the consultant and the project steering committee through review, and I wanted to get that to you today and get any input or feedback that I could from the board. And this would discontinue evaluation of the other alternatives at this point. So we do a very high-level review of these alternatives, advantages, disadvantages, trying to identify critical flaws with those. And then once we move past this, we go into the next steps, which is to begin further development of the selected alternatives. So if we get consensus today that 2 and 4 are the ones we want to move forward on, we would further develop those. We would do operational plans. We look at ridership and demand estimation for those alternatives. What would the ridership look like in this area? We do operation, maintenance, and capital costs for each one of the 2 alternatives. Then after all of that is completed, we take that back to the steering committee and to regain feedback from the steering committee to review those alternatives. And once we get past that stage, then we go back to the stakeholders and out to the public with the recommended alternatives as we present those, to try to then, after we get that feedback from both the stakeholders community and through all the advisory committees, to come up with what we refer to as a locally preferred alternative that we would look to advance if there was a desire to do so. So that's the outline of the presentation today, looking for consensus on the alternatives that we've presented and answer any questions that are possible.
Yeah, Commissioner. So, yeah, you know, DLNW has been the subject of conversation, as you pointed out, in studies. And the reason is it's an interesting space in a very strategic location. It's got a few issues that need to be worked out, as you pointed out. But what's different now is all the Canalside development and people and activity. And this is what half a block down from all the Canalside stuff. And it's a shame we can't find someone through maybe some public offering to develop it and turn it into a revenue source for us. Not only inside, it's got that beautiful patio sitting out there. You see all the water. I mean, and located where you could create a bridge to the First Niagara Center if you wanted to bring those activities together. I think it's incredible potential. We just haven't been able to put the connection together with it. Yes.
To your point, Commissioner, you know, we show the DLNW very frequently.
Sure.
The repeating theme that we have hear from all interested parties is there's really no
access for First Niagara. They don't even need the campground. Couldn't they, if you had a bridge across for First Niagara?
And not only the arena itself, but you could also access those parking ramps which sit vacant most of the day.
So they don't need to go near our activity, you could access it at that point.
The other thing that you could do is, with alignment number 4, if you were in there, you could create a very robust station on South Park and then go upstairs and through there. So you could have a very nice presence on South Park as a gateway type of environment that would then take you into the station and through that space.
Commissioner Hicks.
You know, I had the opportunity to meet with Mr. George and selecting your last name, Laura. And to me, the most exciting thing about this is the connectivity to the rest of the city. The fact that this allows us to go to airport houses, to South House. To me, that's the exciting portion of this. And though I don't disagree with anything you're saying, I think we should have, as a commission, some consistency. You know, when I first joined this board, we got out of the waterfront and those buildings, because we said we didn't want to, that's not our core business. Our core business was transportation. So though this sounds very exciting about connecting this to that, that's not our core business. And it seems a little bit of a discrepancy between what our mission is, to say we're getting out of the waterfront, we're getting rid of those buildings because it's not our core, and then to talk about this kind of development. I would caution everybody to think what we do, which is public transportation. And so the idea of why we do this for connectivity for the rest of the city, to be able to provide reasonably priced and accessible transportation should be our core mission.
Yeah, I think, and I think we all agree, we wouldn't imagine being in the development of that second floor, but if there was, we've been trying to find a partner potentially to do something with it on their dime, not on our dime.
Since 1983.
Yeah, so it's been a while.
1983.
Okay, well, that's true. So that's part of what this study is, to try and figure out the best and highest use of that property and how we could, first and foremost, improve public transportation down in the Cobblestone district. I would say that's
our core.
That's the number one objective that we have. And I think the second objective is there a way that we can enhance public transportation in the Cobblestone district and potentially find a use, even if it's not us using it, somebody else on that second level. And, part of that DL&W was demolished. Is a very beautiful, the most beautiful historic component of it was demolished, and I don't remember what year it was demolished. But what we're left with is this sort of appendage to it, which is important because it's our rail yard. But there really is no way, as cool as that upstairs area is, it's going to cost a fortune to create access to it properly. And then if you talk about putting bridges, I don't have to tell you how expensive that is. So, I think we ought to advance the most impact we can have at that facility is to our public transportation. Right. Yeah. That should be our focus. Yeah.
How many square feet is that second floor? I can't remember.
80,000. 35,000 uncovered, 80,000 covered, for a total of 115,000 square feet.
You walk that every day, Commissioner?
I just had it measured. No, I actually got that statistic some years ago when doing these various things where various people wanted to look at it. There was a time when Chris Jacobs, the county clerk, and Stan Lipsy and a couple of other interesting, strange group of people actually came and looked at it for things that they were all thinking of. So I got those statistics for
That
them.
sounds about right. I was
Yeah.
gonna guess 120,000.
Yeah.
So that's.
It's some of the coolest space. People don't realize it's up there. If
Exactly.
you go up there,
Yeah.
when you saw that picture, it's the coolest space. And then the outdoor patio.
Oh, yeah.
It's the biggest outdoor patio I've seen in Buffalo, anywhere, period. It's unbelievable.
And it's starting to look, and
Yeah.
it looks more interesting every year. Like from that outdoor
Yeah.
patio, now you can see that park that had
Right.
Overdorf and that
Right.
is, and and then the casino. All these interesting things are going up around there, so it's looking more and more interesting every
Yeah,
month of the
so,
year.
I'm sorry, Commissioner.
Yeah, first, Mr. Morrell, I'm sorry, I had a brain in front of me for everything, so I apologize. But, again, the best way to make that a potential benefit for the region is to focus on public transportation, where we need people there to see it. Make it business.
Yeah, so if we do that and we don't cut off the second floor as an opportunity
Right.
for somebody else to make investment out there would be the ideal circumstance, I think, because it is such a amazing space in such an amazing location. It is true, and yet, of course, our first priority is the transportation side. But it would be, Tom, why don't you speak to that? And is that how you're thinking in terms of objectives? How are you feeling about that?
Well, I think the goals are pretty clear. You know, obviously, the goal number one was enhance transit access to those two districts. But anything we can do, obviously the costs in our environment play a huge role in this. Once we get through, I think the two alternatives provide us with two specific opportunities. One is really more geared towards opening that space up with a little bit loss of access, but a little bit improved operations. Where the other is really still keeping it on the outside, and maybe there's chances in the future to access. But I think when you start to look at the cost of the two, and compare one to the other, what is it going to be the upcharge to start to really provide access to that? And then what's the future benefit to us as an agency if we do indeed do it? So I think we're way too early to tell, but I think the recommendation that we're moving forward today aligns us to get the information we need to make a better decision.
Can you talk about the stakeholders, when you talk about meeting with the stakeholders, who are the stakeholders?
I don't have the list with me today, but we had a number of developers. We had Benderson, Ulan, Ellicott, as well as Sinatra, and I think there was a few others as well. We also met with Erie Canal Harbor, the Sabres, Harbor Center. We met with the city of Buffalo, the state of New York. So it was a global cross-section. We met with Explore and More. We met with the Senecas, because all of those are major stakeholders in that area. So we looked at both private developers, we looked at folks who are doing operations in there, and there's more that I'm forgetting, but that's a representative sample of who we talked to.
Can we, just because this is so important, can we just go back to 2 and 4 again? And
Yep.
just go over that so everyone's
Absolutely.
clear on exactly what 2 and 4 are?
Okay, so alignment 2, the one back. Alignment 2, once again, is the, what we call it offset South Park. So really, it does depart from current revenue service at the foot of Main Street, which all of them do, that's because that's our current limit. And it simply hugs along if I'm going outbound or I'm heading west.
So you're
Excuse me,
saying it takes the special event station away?
That's what that's what we haven't defined yet. If you look today, we have Erie Canal Harbor Development Station, which is right up in this area, just a kitty corner to the side of Harbor Center. And then we've got special events, which is right down here. From a transit perspective, that really makes no sense. They're way too close together. And if you were ever really to have them as full service stations, they work well today because of the nature of how we use the special event station. But if they were to be full-service stations, they're so close together. So we haven't really defined the stations yet, but the initial input from the stakeholders is they like Erie Canal Harbor Station, and they really wonder about the utility of this. So what we'll do is, when we start looking at the alignments, we'll then start to look at station locations to help drive those ridership forecasts. So we'll create sample station locations in the district for each alignment to then drive ridership, and that'll help us define, once again, how much they're going to be used. So the models will be used to do ridership.
Okay, so this line then, show where there's access or lines where there aren't lines now, where the train is not in service now.
From this point here, there's no revenue service in this area whatsoever. So currently, there's a gate at this location. You come in here, you can go into the train shed,
Yep.
we do train storage in here.
Yep.
And then you can also run down track 4, which then gets us right into our shops where we do all of our
Right.
preventative maintenance and maintenance work. So this track 4 runs right along the perimeter of the building and into the yard and shops, or into the shops right at this location. So everything from this point forward is just simply operations and maintenance activities that go today.
Under alignment 2?
Under all alignments, and current conditions, current operations today, revenue service stops here, and this is all non-revenue maintenance operations activities. Under this alignment, we would then peel off the edge rail and then add a new rail on the inside of that. So we would use track 4 essentially to this point, and then we go out and around the building with a new track. So at the current point here, we would then put a switch in, we would move the rail line around the edge of this building, it would be tucked right up against the edge of it. Because currently track 4 goes along the perimeter of this building, but then goes inside at this location. We do not want to go inside, so there, we got a little bit more room to play with. We move outside at that location, and then we go the second track that mirrors that all the way along here, once again, on the South Park side or on the inside of that. So this becomes 2 rail lines, one using track 4 to this point, and then with a new one next to it, and then 2 new ones from here out, where track 4 remains intact in here. And once again, this is the location where we have to create delineation where we can then pull cars out of revenue service into our maintenance facility to do those activities.
Okay. And there's new lines next to it because?
We need two rail lines in order to do true expansion of the service in the future. If there were just a single line that came through here, we would experience essentially single tracking if we ever did future expansion of the system.
Okay.
The other thing is with a single line, you have difficulty loading and unloading. It's just much simpler to operation when there's two tracks.
Mr. George, what's the impact on the surface again, on South Park?
On this building here,
No, not the building, on the
on the
street.
surface, let's go to the cross section, Jason. Right here, we're able to maintain 2 travel lanes and 2 sidewalks on South Park with this alignment. So you are moving into the alignment a little bit to build this second track, but not so much that you're not able to provide 2 lanes of traffic. Let's go back 1 slide now. You'll see in here, this is currently how it is. So right now you have a bike lane, you have a travel lane, you have a travel lane and a bike lane and curb. So we would essentially be pushing this over. The bike lane would then most likely have to be relocated to potentially to the Riverwalk itself or to a different alignment, because this would indeed impact the roadway enough so that you'd be hitting on that bike lane. But it would still be able to allow these 2 traffic lanes to remain essentially moved in that direction away from the DLW facility.
What's the liability if someone should fall that way after engaging too many beers? And how do we protect the public from those rails?
It's much like our mall, we really don't. It's an
Good
inherent
luck to you.
liability we have with folks walking on the rail all the way through the mall area. Okay, so that was alignment 2. Once again, just go back to the photo one more time. This shows the fence line along, and track 4 is right on the inside of that fence line. So that fence line essentially would have to go away, and then the new perimeter would be the edge of that building. Now go to that old drawing from '83. You can see here where they had right along in here. So it's the same type of configuration they had in '83 that we have today. Let's go to 4. 4, now once again, it's the same break-off point, referred to as a break-off point, when we leave Main Street, and now we go along the interior edge of the DL&W train shed. So this is, I refer to these as 2 different things. I call this the DL&W terminal or train shed. That's the old train shed where the old DL&W station used to be in this area where the vehicles would come in, and these were the boarding platforms, and then you go into the old terminal. So we still have the boarding platforms. That second level was where they used to bring trains in. So this building is built for it. And then when I refer to the shops, that's this area down in here where we do all of our maintenance activities, where we have all of our train washing and maintenance, and we do all of that. So this alignment, once again, comes along this interior edge within the building envelope itself, and then comes out here and creates revenue service through this area in a future expansion mode. At this point in time, if we were to do this and we were just to come to this area and build a station here, most likely our revenue service would not extend beyond this location. Revenue service would only come down through here if we were to indeed do future expansion, but this creates the opportunity for it.
Can you highlight the right-of-way property where it would tie in?
Yeah, it's a little difficult to see, but we do have right-of-way. We own right-of-way down in here. It's currently owned by the authority, so if we were to continue down through here, we would do it on existing rail right-of-way versus doing it on a street right-of-way in here. So if you're on South Park, you're going to go on street right-of-way and share that, whereas if you're in here, you'd be able to utilize some of our abandoned right-of-way that we have owned.
Are those homes down there? People living there in that right of way?
This is industry right here.
Industry employing people.
Pardon me?
Industry employing people.
Employing people, but not on the right-of-way itself.
So the right of way would not impact those businesses?
No, there's some parking on there, but that's all that's there today. There's nothing, there's no physical structures or operations going on in the right-of-way itself.
And what's the additional cost for going through the building?
We haven't done those cost estimates. The only cost estimate we did at this point in time was that incremental cost to go up.
Oh, you're right, that's $40 million too much money.
Yeah.
But you haven't done the cost of.
Now, we're gonna, once we get the authorization to move forward with the two alternatives, we're then getting into not only the capital cost, but the operation and maintenance cost of these options, because they will vary. So we want to have all of that information to make that decision moving
I'm
forward.
gonna ask James, can I ask James to give us like a bit of, like, James, give us your urban plan perspective, like, if you think of these from an urban plan standpoint, what goes through your mind?
Well, basically, with the onset of a stadium at some point, this allows us the opportunity, as the commissioner indicated, to bring service all the way from South Campus through B&MC into downtown, continue it out to the stadium. And future areas like the airport, and Larkinville possibly, and what's the other one? Central Terminal. So we own right-of-way from basically Harlem Road out to the airport, and then properties that we would not necessarily go through, but alongside, that would allow us the ability to get to the airport.
This is you. I just say, because I met with them just before Easter and went through this, and it's my interest in surface transportation. My interest was the Buffalo Niagara Medical Corridor, and how you get people there. And I always have envisioned the 33 as, how you do this. But this is a huge thing for our authority, because it really does push forward economic development of the region and pushes forward connecting huge segments of Western New York in an inexpensive way. I don't know whether 2 or 4 is a better alignment. I mean, that we have to see the numbers. But in terms of